We all know that Father's Day is a day for honoring fathers and the influence of fathers in society. Most people aren't aware, though, that it came relatively late as a complement to Mother's Day. The first observance of Father's Day in America didn't happen until 1910 through the efforts of a woman named Sonora Smart Dodd of Spokane, Washington. She was a leader in what was formerly known as the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church, now known as the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. And she was listening to a church sermon about the newly recognized Mother's Day in 1909. And she felt strongly that fatherhood needed recognition as well. She wanted a celebration that honored fathers like her own dad, who was left to raise his family alone when his wife died, giving birth to their sixth child. So on June 19th, 1910, young members of the Spokane YMCA, they went to church wearing roses, a red rose to honor a living father, and a white rose to honor a deceased one. And Miss Dodd traveled through the city in a horse-drawn carriage carrying gifts to all the shut-in dads. God in Judaism has 70 names. God is called a soul friend, a yedid nefesh. God is called a rock, as we just heard Abby sing, my rock and my redeemer. God is called a nurturing mother in Hebrew. And God is also called a loving father, which many people know from our Father who art in heaven, or Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. In a few weeks from now, after Zachary's chanting of the Torah, we will read in Deuteronomy chapter 131, God carried Israel through the wilderness like a man carrying his son. Whatever else God may be, God is primarily and preeminently a loving heart, caring most about our loves, our aspirations, our sufferings too. And Oscar Wilde once remarked, when we're young, we idealize our parents. As adolescents, we judge them. When we're older, we understand them. The same can be said of our relationship with God. When we Jews were young people, we idealized the God who took us out of Egypt and gave us our Torah. For the Jewish people, it's arguable that our adolescence began from when the temple was destroyed in 70, really until World War II and perhaps the Holocaust, when many judged God after the murder of 6 million men, women, and children. We judged a God who seemed not to hear us, who seemed to have abandoned us. But now that we're older, we can understand that God has not abandoned us. God is with us through it all, through man's inhumanity to man. God is, for instance, this morning, God is not to blame for immigrant children being ripped apart from their moms or their dads at detention centers. God is close, perhaps closest to every crying mother and child this morning. We can find God everywhere, even at home in parenting. Imagine a first child and the first time that child falls down. Imagine being, since it's Father's Day, we'll say a dad, watching that child fall and cry, and then comforting the child. Maybe that's how God feels when we fall down. You know what I mean? God doesn't intervene because God has endowed us with human freedom. Or imagine playing peekaboo with a little child and then removing your hands from your face and watching that little child's delight. The aha moment for that child is the discovery that despite the peekaboo, you had been there all along. Maybe that's how it is with God as well. Zachary will be chanting from the book of Numbers, but the Torah begins in Genesis with sibling stories featuring brothers, not Sam and Zach, but Ishmael and Isaac, Esau and Jacob, Joseph and his brothers, just to name a few. And in their various rivalries, the tough brother, the warlike brother, always loses out in the end to the more peaceful and thoughtful one. And yet it's not about winners or losers in these Bible stories. There is the same sacred ending to these stories most people miss. What's the sacred ending? The feuding brothers must reunite. Ishmael and Isaac are reconciled when they bury their dad, Abraham. Jacob and Esau embrace and weep. Joseph forgives his brothers in Egypt. Did you know that the Bible mentions Joseph crying? His tears are mentioned in Hebrew 8 times. It's the Bible's way of saying that men need both kind of masculinities, toughness and gentility. Real men in the Bible cry. It differs from the Hollywood version. Western culture sends the message, real men don't cry, as in take it like a man. But in the Torah, men do cry. Abraham weeps when his wife Sarah dies. Jacob cries when he meets his wife, his beloved Rachel. Esau, you might call him, this is for the older people here, the biblical Marlboro man. That was a cigarette commercial. He weeps when he realizes that his brother has deceived him. Esau. Joseph weeps upon the sight of his brothers. Now, true, we have our share of warriors, King David, the Maccabees, but we don't remember King David as a warrior. We remember him as the author of the book of Psalms we've been singing this morning in services. As the prophet Zechariah declared, not by might nor by power, but by your Spirit, declares God. What's the message here coming from our Jewish heritage? True power is not a fist, it's an open hand. Just after my own son's bar mitzvah, when I was well into my second decade, not only as a rabbi, but as a dad, I started to change my second will. I don't mean the one with a life insurance policy, in the event, God forbid, that I leave sooner than expected. No, I mean the will. I encourage every person to write, not just dads, moms, grandparents, people who aren't parents. It's called an ethical will. It's what I want others to remember, not only about me, but about my faith and my life in general. The writing of an ethical will is an ancient Jewish practice, one my father adopted and gave to me as a present before he died. My ethical will is a work in progress, but I just want to share in closing before we go to the ethical will, the Torah, that Zachary will receive from all the people who explain why he's in this world, his grandparents and parents. I want to share with you one section of my ethical will that's been inspired by the writer and poet Noah Ben Shea, and the section is called Remembering. To my daughters and son who I love more than life itself, remember this, my children. Remember that wanting to know everything is okay, but trying everything is not. Remember that being right is important, but reminding others you are right is not. Remember to listen to the opinion of others, but never forget to listen to your best self. Remember that God is always with you, and that God is never so with you as when you think you are alone. Remember that life can be an unexpected joy, and remember that, especially after the rough times. Remember that it is your human right to take what is offered, and your Jewish responsibility to give more than you take. Remember that you are strong and vulnerable, and that being vulnerable is a strength. Remember your Jewish past, because it is not past. Live it today. Pass it on to your children tomorrow. Remember that all of those relatives and friends who came ahead of you are cheering for you and will be waiting for you. Remember that for everything you're growing out of, there is more you will grow into. Your Jewish heritage teaches it is never too late to grow or to grow up. Remember that a leader is not someone who rules over others, but one who lifts up others. Be a leader by lifting up others. Remember that you will make mistakes. Try to make new ones. Remember that to be successful, you must love yourself when you fail. Remember, as you grow older, not to complain that others aren't who they once were, but be prepared to accept them for who they might yet become. Remember from your childhood that often the best view of life's parade comes from sitting on someone else's shoulders. And a giant is anyone who remembers that we are all sitting on someone else's shoulders. Remember to kiss your own children someday, not so that they will kiss you back, but so that they will kiss their children and their children's children. Remember to put your faith in charge, not your fears. Oh, just two more. Remember that it's okay to wrestle with God, for that is what the name Israel literally means. And remember that the need to talk with God is God's way of giving us the chance to talk with ourselves. And finally, remember that you are my greatest blessing, and that when I have taken my last breath, I will be the wind at your back, urging you on, the breeze on your cheek, drying your tear. Carrie got us started with a tear as she was reading the parents' blessing. It said that at every bar mitzvah, there is a river of tears. A parent once saw, actually it was a bar mitzvah boy, who once saw like his mother or grandparent crying. And only when he was older did he understand why she was crying. She was living vicariously through me. And so for all those tears of joy, we continue with the Torah service on page 244 as we call forward lots of family members to open the doors to the ark, and all the generations of Zach's family to form the line of the generations. Please rise if you're able as we join together in singing on page 244.